Today I am launching some different content. I'm wanting to focus in on the franchise of Gojira, Godzilla. I had watched the original 1954 Gojira some years back. It was probably one of the first Japanese sci-fi films I watched outside of anime. I had this thought about a year ago, actually. I was thinking about content before I ever launched anything, and this idea came about because this was 2024. Godzilla Minus One was coming out and had its theatrical release. And even though I wanted to catch it in theaters, I wasn't able to make it happen. When I did finally get a chance to watch it, it was a phenomenal film, and I was struck by how much it evoked the atmosphere and the feelings of the original from the 50s so many years prior. Speaking as myself, I like projects, and I like having a focus. It might be a similar impulse to binge watching, I suppose, a certain TV show, but I definitely had a stretch probably almost 10 years ago now, where I went through just about all of the Kurosawa Akira films I could get my hands on, which was most of it. And then the same year that Terry Pratchett died, I actually ran through the entire Discworld series in 4 months, just reading back to back to back. Watching Godzilla Minus One gave me that feeling. I wanted to deep dive into the entire franchise. And when I say the entire franchise, I mean the Japanese series of films. I'm not talking about the US films or any other knockoffs that may have come around throughout the world. I'd certainly want to catch all of the franchise, and I want to watch it in the order they came out. But this is going to be a longer project, and I'm not going to be insistent on plowing through it and doing nothing else just for the sake of completion in a time frame. I do intend to approach content about the franchise a little differently than other movie spotlights. Normally, I prefer to not ruin something pivotal in a film or give too much away so that it's something that someone can still watch and discover for themselves. However, the Godzilla franchise is iconic, the character's iconic, and most of it has been out for decades and pretty accessible. So for my own fun, I'm chucking the concept of spoilers out for content regarding Godzilla, and I'm just going to absolutely deep dive on the entire story in all of these films. So, Gojira, which is the Japanese title, and somehow got switched to being called Godzilla further into English-speaking areas. Nevertheless, the original title is Gojira, and it launched in 1954. The film opens on a ship that abruptly sinks with no obvious cause. Just sudden calamity. Officials send another ship out to investigate, but it ends up sinking as well. A survivor from one of the shipwrecks drifts and washes up on Odo Island, and he's been heard muttering of something about a monster. There is a village on the island, and they have been experiencing a sudden drop in their fishing. So when this person washes up, talking about a monster, one of the older villagers is heard mentioning that this must be the work of Gojira, but he's scoffed at by some of the younger villagers. Reporters actually come out to the island to investigate what is going on, but they're dismissive when they are hearing these accounts and claims that there is some kind of large animal at work causing this disruption with the fishing. Later the same night, after the reporter arrives and is looking into this, the village enacts a sort of purification exorcism ritual. The reporter ends up speaking with the elder who was talking about Gojira earlier and learns that this alleged Gojira is a monster from the sea that apparently preys on humans. Later that same night, a storm sweeps over the island and a mysterious creature shows up. This creature ends up killing quite a few of the villagers, destroying property, killing livestock. It is a mess. Following the storm and the devastation, some of these Odo villagers go to Tokyo to make a case for disaster relief efforts. Upon hearing the reports from the villagers that the storm was not natural and their mentions about a very large animal wreaking havoc, the government reaches out to a Dr. Yamane. Dr. Yamane is a paleontologist, and he advises putting together an investigative party to figure out what exactly happened on the island. He also joins the team for bringing in his own expertise, his own skill set, and his daughter Emiko comes along as his assistant. The investigating party does make their way over to the island. They find that wells on the island, only on a specific side of it, have dangerous levels of radiation present. Dr. Yamane also immediately identifies this massive depression as the footprint of creature. The footprint shows signs of radiation as well, and shockingly, a trilobite, a creature long thought extinct, is also embedded in the footprint. A warning alarm bell suddenly sounds out, and people start to scatter. The investigating party scatters as well, because why wouldn't you when there's clearly something going on? They eventually locate Dr. Yamane, and he claims that he saw a creature from the Jurassic period just over the horizon. And then, just to give him actual proof immediately, the giant head of a creature pops up over the hill for everyone to see. In the sudden panic, and with everyone fleeing, Dr. Yamane's daughter Emiko falls, but very luckily is picked up and secured out of harm's way by Ogata, who was the ship captain that brought them to the island. Dr. Yamane gets back to Emiko, and they both head over to where the villagers are pointing out tracks leading back into the ocean, showing where the creature headed off to. Back in Tokyo, Dr. Yamane is giving a presentation about Jurassic-era dinosaurs. He states that at some point, a creature bridging the gap between reptilian sea-dwelling creatures and terrestrial mammals was born. He believes that such an evolutionary link of a creature is real, and is asserting that the creature on the island known as Gojira is that creature. He is thinking that it survived all of these millennia by living in a deep sea trench and eating the creatures that dwell in that area deep within the ocean. He theorizes that nuclear activity likely altered that habitat, and that recent hydrogen bomb explosions disrupted the creature. As proof of where this creature resides and its age, he shows them photos that were taken of that massive footprint on the island with the trilobite in it, and also shares that tests of sediment in the footprint match the soil content from the Jurassic era. He also reveals that the sediment is emitting dangerous levels of radiation, such as those from an atomic bomb. Extremely unfortunately, this also leads to the conclusion that Gojira has also absorbed dangerous amounts of radiation. By this point, the officials listening to Dr. Yamane's presentation start to freak out. They start shouting and arguing about whether this news should be made public or if it's too dangerous and should be kept secret at all costs. They also have grave concerns about the uneasy state of global affairs. They fear that news of a creature impacted by nuclear weapons could upend the fragile stability that has been holding since concluding World War II. A decision is eventually reached to form a counter-Gojira organization dedicated to figuring out how to deal with and stop the threat of Gojira. Newsreels show that now 17 ships have been mysteriously lost at sea. People are discussing how bad things are getting. They were already dealing with contaminated tuna and radioactive fallout, and now there's this new threat that Gojira brings. At the headquarters of the Counter-Gojira organization, plans are being made to send out a fleet of frigates to deploy depth charges for combating Gojira. When the news of the plans are announced publicly, Dr. Yamane actually gets quite upset. As a paleontologist, he wants to find a solution where Gojira isn't killed. Later that night, a sighting of Gojira by a pleasure cruise causes further tensions and fear. The next day, Dr. Yamane heads into a meeting to discuss the Gojira efforts. There are worries about needing to suspend international shipping routes due to the disruptions. Dr. Yamane is asked for ideas about how to potentially kill Gojira. When he gets upset, they insist on needing ideas and plans for dealing with this. Dr. Yamane sort of claps back, saying that it's impossible. If nuclear radiation did not kill him, what else on Earth could? Instead, he insists that more research is needed to investigate and figure out how Gojira could absorb that kind of radiation and survive. Though a reporter in the room, Hagewara, agrees, others are concerned over the costs of research versus looking at more final solutions. The same reporter, Hagewara, is asked by his boss to seek out and interview a Dr. Serizawa. Serizawa is also Dr. Yamane's future son-in-law. Apparently, it's been arranged that he will marry Emiko for years at this point. Next, there's a brief interlude where Emiko is speaking with the ship captain that saved her back on the island, Ogata. Emiko and Ogata have fallen in love, and they want to be together. Emiko believes her father will understand her wanting to break off her engagement, and that she's actually always thought of Serizawa as an older brother figure. The reporter, Hagewara, comes by and asks for Emiko's help in reaching Serizawa for the interview that he's trying to set up. Emiko agrees, and maybe it's a two birds, one stone kind of thought, but she plans to also use the trip out to tell Serizawa of wanting to break their engagement. Once at Serizawa's house, he rebuffs Hagewara and says that the reporter is mistaken in thinking Serizawa has anything useful to provide, contribute for this interview he's seeking. Hagewara counters with the news that a journalist in Sweden corresponded with a German scientist. Said German scientist shared that Serizawa's work would be a breakthrough for counter-Gojira operations. Sidebar: as far as I can tell, they're still keeping the news very contained to Japan, so this feels like a massive breach of news that someone in Switzerland is talking to someone in Germany who also knows about this Japanese scientist's research and thinks it would be useful to combat a creature none of them should know about. Regardless, when Serizawa continues to deny any such information, the reporter leaves. Once it is just Emiko and Serizawa, he offers to share with her the results of his research, but only if she swears to tell no one else of what she sees. He leads her down to his lab, which contains all manner of equipment, of course, and a tank of fish. Serizawa adds a mysterious substance to the tank and flips a switch, then pulls Emiko further back. We only see their faces as they watch on. Emiko screams and hides from whatever the sight is. Serizawa makes her again promise to tell no one, and though she is fully shaken up, she does agree. Emiko goes back home, and Ogata is there to greet her, but is definitely confused at how downtrodden she is. Dr. Yamane comes out from his home office, but then an alarm sounds out, signaling that Gojira is back. Dr. Yamane rushes out, and when Ogata goes to follow, Emiko stops him briefly to let him know she couldn't go through with breaking the news to Serizawa of wanting to be with Ogata instead. We cut over to see Gojira emerging from the ocean. Soldiers are shooting with no effect, and people are fleeing to underground shelters. Dr. Yamane rushes over to the police barricades and urges them to let their commanders know that the lights draw Gojira's attention and should be turned off. Sadly, unfortunately, they dismiss him and do not bother to take that knowledge seriously. Gojira proceeds to make his way through a train yard, wrecking and destroying a train incoming and killing most of its passengers. He then chucks a bridge out of his way as he goes further into the city. At the next meeting for the Counter Gojira organization, they decide to implement a plan for building a 30-meter high fence that will go along the entire coast and can be electrified. Their hope is that it's capable of killing or at least causing damage to Gojira. As the fence is being constructed, evacuation plans for those coastal areas are being drawn up for the Coastal Guard and the army to carry out. At home, Emiko is approached by Ogata. He says that he wants to ask her father for his consent to marriage with Emiko, which she happily agrees to. Dr. Yamane comes home shortly after, but he is noticeably upset. He laments that all they can think of is killing Gojira, when they could instead choose to study him. But that's an option they're dismissing outright. Ogata declares that he agrees with the decision to kill Gojira. Being a unique creature doesn't mean they should do nothing to keep Gojira from destroying the country. Ogata also views Gojira as a product of the atomic bombs that still haunt Japan. That just makes Dr. Yamane more agitated. He insists it's critical to study a creature that can survive getting through that kind of high dose of radiation. He accuses Ogata of only wanting to kill Gojira and demands that he get out of the house. After Dr. Yamane storms off, Emiko apologizes, but Ogata admits he should not have spoken that way to him. A radio announcement comes through that Gojira has been sighted, and the fence is going to be electrified within the area of that sighting. Gojira emerges, the electricity is surging through the fence, and cannons are going off. None of it matters. Gojira isn't hurt in the slightest and proceeds to wreck the fence. He also displays a new power, a heat ray that emerges from his mouth and melts clear through the fence. Gojira continues into the city, melting buildings, wrecking everywhere he trods, and all of the weapons and tanks fail to kill him or even damage him. Fighter jets come through. They have no more success than the rest. and the live footage is being aired on the TV for everyone to witness this devastation. Eventually, Gojira just chooses on his own to head back into the ocean, leaving the city an absolute wreck. The next day shows the heartbreaking impact of this latest attack. Wounded and radiation-sick people are brought to shelters and hospitals. Emiko is present at one of these hospitals, soothing a child crying out for her ailing mother. Ogata arrives at the hospital, and Emiko pulls him off to the side and tells him that she has something very important to share. Even though she made a promise to Serizawa, she can't keep silent anymore. In a flashback to Serizawa's lab, we see what actually happened to that tank of fish. They were brutally killed. Serizawa shares that what has occurred is that all of the oxygen in the water in the tank was disintegrated, leading the fish to die by asphyxiation. Following that, the remains were then liquefied. His invention that has caused all of this is something he has termed the oxygen destroyer. Serizawa shares that he was studying oxygen when he discovered an unknown form of energy. Experimenting with this new form left him terrified and unable to eat for days. He reveals that one tiny piece of this substance could turn the entirety of Tokyo Bay into a graveyard. Though he is studying this for research purposes, he fears it being used as a weapon on par with a nuclear bomb, and thus the potential for the devastation of all humanity. Serizawa wants to find a use for the oxygen destroyer that can benefit society, but until that point, he refuses to make it public knowledge. If he is ever forced to share his invention as it is, he will immediately destroy all of his notes, all of his experimentation, just to ensure that no one can ever reconstruct it. With the flashback ending, Ogata reassures Emiko that Serizawa will forgive her, considering that this can be used to end the threat of Gojira. Ogata pleads with him that it can't be wrong to use this to end the threat that Gojira poses. Serizawa still refuses to use the oxygen destroyer, and then storms off to his lab. Ogata and Emiko rush to follow, and even after finding out they've been locked out, Ogata manages to break in. He sees Serizawa with arms full of papers, getting ready to destroy them, and he rushes to stop him. They struggle over this box of research, and Ogata ends up decently injured. While they each calm down, Ogata is still trying to convince Serizawa that this is their only hope of dealing with Gojira. Serizawa, however, says once this has been used even a single time, politicians around the world will be salivating over the thought of getting access to such a weapon. It could absolutely spell the end of humanity to have the oxygen destroyer out in the world. As a scientist, and as a human being, Serizawa says he cannot allow that to happen. Emiko and Ogata seem to agree, but Ogata still asks, what else is there to do about Gojira? Should they just let this happen, knowing what they know? And also, how would anyone know it was Serizawa behind the invention of the weapon? Serizawa disagrees. He says that humans are weak, and even if he burns and destroys all of his notes, the knowledge is still going to be in his head. How can he ensure that at some point he won't be forced to make the device again? A radio announcement then comes through. It's a children's choir singing, praying for peace and light and for devastation to be no more. While the children sing, TV footage is showing the destruction that Gojira wrought through the city. Serizawa is moved by the footage and ends up admitting that Ogata is right. But this will be his first and last time he ever uses this device. He then proceeds with burning all of his notes just to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. A ship is seen heading out onto the ocean. The reporter Hagewara is on board to provide live updates. He reports that Geiger counters are being used on board to pinpoint Gojira's location out at sea. Also on the ship are Serizawa, Emiko, Ogata, and Dr. Yamane. Serizawa asks for a diving suit. He insists that he has to be suited up and down below to use the oxygen destroyer properly. Though Ogata insists on being the one with his own diving experience, Serizawa holds firm and is suited up. Ogata then declares they'll do it together and continues getting his own diving suit on. Once suited up, Serizawa is handed the oxygen destroyer by Dr. Yamane. Serizawa is noticeably saddened at the idea that this is when his invention has to come out. Sidebar, why are they holding the lines? They are not sea savvy in any sense. I suspect emotional resonance, but practicality should have chosen a sailor. Oh well. Serizawa and Ogata reach the ocean floor and start looking for Gojira. They spot him, and then Gojira starts to approach. On the boat, there is an announcement to start pulling on the dive lines. Ogata starts to rise, but Serizawa remains below. After reaching the surface, Ogata calls out for Serizawa, and then calls for him down the lines, but gets no response. Down below, Serizawa watches Gojira's approach, and then activates and deploys the oxygen destroyer. And Gojira is immediately impacted. Ogata continues calling for Serizawa through the lines while Gojira thrashes, and they can see it even above water. Serizawa finally answers that the device has worked, and then tells Emiko and Ogata to be happy before cutting his tow line and oxygen line. The water churns, and Gojira surfaces to roar, only to sink back down to the depths. Far beneath the surface of the water, the oxygen destroyer continues to do its work, and Gojira is destroyed, then disintegrated. On the ship, they all watch on and see the disturbances in the water dwindle away. Hagewara reports that they've succeeded, and that Gojira will never rise from the ocean again. He also states that this victory would not have been possible without the assistance and invention of Dr. Serizawa. Dr. Yamane sits with his hat off in respect and mourning, and Emiko and Ogata cry over Serizawa's final words. Dr. Yamane muses that Gojira can't possibly be the only surviving member of its species, and that if humans continue to play around with nuclear weapons, it's almost inevitable that another Gojira could rise up from the depths and be something to contend with. And that is, start to finish, the original Gojira that kicked off an entire franchise. While Gojira can be classified as action, it's really more of a somber film. The film's concept and development, unsurprisingly, were heavily impacted and shaped by the atomic bombings that Japan suffered only a decade prior in World War II. On top of that, on March 1st, 1954, the US dropped a 15-ton megabomb that was coined Castle Bravo on Bikini Atoll. A Japanese fishing boat came into contact with the radioactive fallout from the test of this hydrogen bomb. The crew grew ill, and their catch of fish was also contaminated. Once they arrived back in Japan, fear for food safety quickly surged. Suffering from the effects of radiation, the crew were kept in hospital for over a year for testing and recovery after that. It shouldn't be surprising that there was an absolute outcry over this. International backlash coming up over the dangers of nuclear activity and testing. Around the time frame of this nuclear test and backlash, the film producer Tanaka Tomoyuki was on a flight back from Indonesia when a project that was supposed to happen there fell through. He had a light bulb moment, a new idea for a monster film that would touch on the recent events with the fishing boat. He ended up putting together this idea for the film and presenting it, and would later be the producer for Gojira. Although it would be ridiculously speedy now, it wasn't strange at the time for a film like this, and in fact this is how it happened, to be approved by mid-April 1954 for development and filming, and already ready for release in late October that same year. Additional random tidbit I came across: the person in charge of special effects originally envisioned a more octopus-like monster while they were envisioning Gojira, before they eventually went with more reptilian dinosaur. It's fascinating to dig into the start of a character that is so iconic now. While this is certainly not the first kaiju-style film, or for anyone less familiar, essentially big monster film, it's absolutely the one to launch and really make that style of film successful and popular. Also, frankly, the success of the Gojira Godzilla franchise over the decades has far eclipsed the success of anything else in this vein. Other popular examples are King Kong, of course. Pacific Rim comes to mind as far as more recent examples, and they do not stick to a certain type of animal. Gojira is clearly reptilian dinosaur. King Kong is, of course, a massive, massive ape. Later on in the Gojira franchise, there are so many other long-thought extinct individuals or just brand new, previously unknown. It really could be any massive creature. Regardless of not being the first, Gojira set the benchmark for kaiju films and has clearly gotten to be this level of icon by this point in time. With rewatching Gojira, I'm reminded of how much I enjoy this film. With how monster films are usually set up, it wouldn't be hard to assume that this would be heavily into action, most of the film comprising attacks, special effects, really staying on that level of film. The makers of Gojira, however, chose to have a serious approach to the film. They were aiming for a more realistic depiction of the devastation and destruction and how people would be addressing and coping with such a new, terrible crisis. Ethical concerns are grappled with, and the larger problems that would occur elsewhere in the world are not ignored. Separately, for me, I really appreciate the actor Shimura Takashi, as he's been in so many of the Kurosawa Akira films over the years. So for him to show up as the scientist, Dr. Yamane, was just a treat for me in general. This actor does amazingly well in having gravitas and impact with the characters that he has played. So it really lends that to Gojira as well. If you want to watch Gojira for yourself, in spite of hearing the breakdown from me, it's on a lot of places. For streaming, Gojira is on HBO Max, Amazon Prime, the Criterion Channel, Cinemax, TCM, Shout, and Plex. Of course, things always change, and JustWatch.com is ridiculously useful just to see where it's at in the future. I'm going to continue watching my way through the entire franchise, slowly but surely, as I get a hold of the films. So content around Gojira will continue to crop up amongst all the rest of the fun Seawald content. Happily for us, Gojira is fictional, and we are not dealing with a radioactive monster that is a force against humanity. So, see you soon.